welcome back to the show. I'm Phil Vischer. Welcome back to the Phil Vischer podcast. I am here with Skye Jitani.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Skye. You okay?
I'll survive.
Skye has a cold.
I've come back from Okoboji with a virus.
Yeah, we were at Okoboji. If you listened last week, we were at Okoboji, and now we're back from Okoboji, which is why we have video now. Because there's no video in Okoboji. People can't see anything out there.
Are they that backwards? There has to be video.
I'm not saying they're
somewhere.
No, they
in
have
Okoboji.
video. They don't have a studio.
Okay.
That's the problem.
In our condo.
Right.
Our timeshare condominium.
Right.
That's a great word. Condominium.
What's the origin of that word?
Minimum.
Oh man, we've derailed
from the Latin.
before even my introduction.
From the Latin, apartment that you own. That's what the Latin means. And Christian Taylor.
Hi.
Who is purple.
I am purple. We'll never be wearing this again. So I hope that you tune in to see this shirt that I will never wear on camera again.
If you're watching on video, you'll notice she's kind of blending into the back wall behind her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And looking like your TV needs adjusting.
And if you're curious about my giant drink, it's because I'm trying to drown my virus.
Is that nice water?
It's a sparkling water with lime.
But
flavor.
they don't pay us for advertising.
Which is Walgreens house brand.
Yes,
right?
this is from Walgreens.
Yeah,
I stopped on the way over.
You're drinking Walgreens water,
I am.
which should have health-giving benefits
Because
You notice that when you check out at
Pharmacists.
Walgreens now, they say, "Be well."
Do they?
do they really?
They've been given a new corporate mandated what's a farewell greeting? What's that called?
A farewell.
A post.
A farewell, just a farewell.
Yeah.
A corporately mandated farewell.
But they're
and do
saying-
you think, Skye, it's because of money?
I think they genuinely want me to be well.
Really?
Yeah, so I can come back and spend more money.
No, they want you to be sick, so you come back and sick more money. They're just saying.
Hey, it's a podcast. What do you know? Hey, it's a podcast. And we got video back. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. We'll talk to Skye and Christian, too.
You never said me before. You didn't even say I was here, but I am.
Yeah, I did. I talked about your purple.
You're right. Where was I?
Do you have a head cold too?
I do.
We've
Actually, I
got
think I have a
no
concussion.
guest,
Oh, that's
none
right.
here for you.
Just us.
So we had Jimmy Needham last week. Hey, it's a podcast. So lend an ear. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here. The Phil Vischer podcast starts right here.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Galaxy Buck update. I'm holding a Galaxy Buck mug that my
Are you
daughter
done?
made for me. Almost. Shooting is done. Editing has to be done basically by the end of this week.
I just want you to know that mug, because the words are so large, all I see is lax, which I think laxative,
I think of lacrosse.
and uck.
Yes, lax uck. That's what I
Do
see.
you remember the comic strip Lax the Duck?
No.
Neither do I. I made it up, but it would be a fun one. It's like Howard the Duck, except that
His name would be Lax.
he runs. Okay, so in a week, everything will be done on Galaxy Buck.
Really?
Except the final mix. And then next week, I'm going to Nashville to do the final mix. And by the end of next week, the film will be finished.
That's fantastic.
And its release date
End
is?
of next week. The release date on DVD is October 22nd, I think.
Okay.
So they got to do all sorts of.
Is there any pre-ordering
They have
or?
to make copies.
Right.
They have to package
But
them.
can you pre-order? Like,
There's a guy who shrink wraps things. He has to shrink wrap every single one of them. His name's John. It's slow. It'll come out in October. Can you pre-order? I don't know. I don't know if ChristianBook.com may be doing pre-orders. I don't know. But it's also going to show up in Walmart.
oh,
It will be the first time Buck Denver has appeared in the mass market.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
How long is this film?
40 minutes.
So it's not like
It's not a movie,
Okay.
but it's longer than a TV. It's basically the same length as VeggieTales DVDs.
are they going to carry any of the What's in the Bible DVDs at Walmart?
They are going. I believe they are taking for this Christmas Galaxy Buck, and Buck Denver asks, "Why do we call it Christmas?" The Christmas special from the What's in the Bible series. And if those go well, then maybe we can get them to take. The problem with What's in the Bible series is that there are 13 of them, and
Right.
it's hard to just
Buy one.
take 2 of them because they're numbered, you know. So we may end up taking all of the What's in the Bibles and putting them into a big box set, and then that might show up, you know.
That'd be a little pricey, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so that's maybe Costco. They like big, giant things that are shrink wrapped together.
I was just there yesterday.
You were at Costco yesterday?
I was at Costco yesterday.
Should we ask you what you bought, or is that too personal?
It depends. We bought some things I would be willing to share.
Depends on what?
You know.
Whether I can ask you what you bought at Costco yesterday depends.
Yeah. I mean,
You can ask him.
I've already asked it.
Yeah.
So it's just a yes or no question. Once I've asked it,
I guess that's true.
There's no dependency.
I got a head cold and Christian has a concussion.
Can I just say, well, here's one thing. This is a disclaimer for this week.
Yes.
I do have a mild concussion. He is sick, and you're not quite prepared because you left your ukulele at the house.
I took my ukulele.
You guys might want to think about turning it off now and listening to an earlier episode. Just
I took
saying.
my ukulele to Okoboji, and I brought it back, so that's good.
That is great.
That is a victory. And then I left it at home when I came into work, and so I had to turn around and drive all the way home and get my ukulele and drive all the way back in the period of time that I had set aside to prep stories for the podcast.
Well, and I think that our audience should know what your priorities are now. That you would rather have Plinky Pete than actually prepare for the podcast.
I know that the podcast would seem less like itself, would seem more different than without the ukulele.
Oh, this is hurting my head.
Than with me underprepared.
That is true.
I agree. Yes.
Me underprepared.
Now I get what you're saying.
No one's gonna really notice. No ukulele, people are gonna notice.
I thought you were kind of ready to ditch the ukulele, though. Like you were thinking maybe it's time to not do this anymore.
I was just grumpy.
Could you find an equally annoying instrument to just switch over to?
I was just grumpy. I was just grumpy because I was in the last weeks of shooting Galaxy Buck, and it was really getting. It was
long.
Yes, I've been shooting for like 13 straight weeks, and it was getting a little old. I was getting tired of the puppets.
Wow.
And I took it out on Blinky Pete. It's so unfair.
Is
unfair.
the full trailer up online now for people to see?
The new one we just did, I don't think it is. Okay. No, we had to finish it because they showed it at the Assemblies of God National Conference last week.
Oh, that's cool.
Wherever that was. I don't know where that was, but they showed it there.
Well, one thing I do want people to understand is when they finally do watch this, I want them to know that all of the sets that they see were basically created in this room. Well, and your living room, but your living room and assembled and filmed in this space.
There are two sets that were built by a friend of mine named Kate Stransky, and she built them in her house. And then there are two sets. Well, one set in particular that we ran out of time to build, and so it had to be done with computer animation because it became clear we were not going to be able to build it ourselves, which is the Buck Denver's call center, the call center at the Galactic Mission Board.
So the sets I'm looking at right here are what?
Oh, there's the bridge of the ship that he flies. There's the volcano cave interior. There's some extra rock work, and then there's all the caves, the hermit's caves. There's a hermit who plays a very key role in this, and his caves. It's very interesting though, because the sets were all built at 1/6 scale, basically, which is like stop motion scale. But then we shoot the puppets green screen and we put them into the 1/6 scale set, so it's easier to build elaborate sets if you don't have to build them full size, especially like the bridge of the USS Enterprise.
Right.
Think about building that full size.
I can't even imagine.
That's kind of an undertaking, and then you either have to throw it all away or you have to keep renting whatever warehouse you built it in for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
But you can just put it in your house and live in it.
That would be fun.
A 1/6 scale bridge you can actually carry around with you.
Right.
You can put it in.
It's a lot more practical.
What do you intend to do with that?
Well, keep it there while we figure out if there are going to be more adventures. Oh. So it's going to stay there for now.
You can auction that away.
And
no, I need it.
I'm saying if you don't make another one.
I need it.
Or when you are done with the space ones, you could auction that away.
I need it.
Yes, you could. Well, what I think is awesome is how you are able to write the script.
Yeah.
Then create the puppets.
Yeah.
Film the puppets. Shoot yourself filming the puppets. Figuring out all the different scales and making the actual sets and all of their props. Figuring out all the lighting.
Yeah.
And
it's a little weird.
I don't know anybody else that likes to work that way.
And then after doing this film that way, I think I know why. It's one thing, because I know of people who have done short films. You know, a guy did like a 10-minute sci-fi short and pretty much did everything himself. You know, I mean, didn't do all the acting.
But that's like 10 minutes.
Yes, and do you know how long it took him?
How long?
5 years.
Yeah.
Because it was in his spare time for 5 years. And it's gorgeous, and it looks great. But this was a 40-minute film in 7 months, 6 months.
Right. Which
7 months.
Kind of nuts. You are the most equally left and right-brained person I've ever met, I think. Because it really does take both those halves to do what you did.
It's
anyway,
weird.
So when you watch it, just know that this is where a lot of it was done.
Yeah, and you'll see.
Are you proud of it? Do you like it?
I think so. I haven't seen it all together yet.
Okay.
So until you see that, you don't know. You don't know. But individual scenes seem to be working quite well. Now, when you string them all together,
we'll see how it goes.
Do they work? I've seen all of Act 2 together, which is the biggest, like 22 minutes of the 40-minute film. And it's almost all scored now. So
that's great.
The
Makes
score
it, doesn't it?
Brings it
Pulls it together.
either saves it, or if it doesn't work, then there's no saving it. Yeah. Okay. We got some interesting feedback from last week's show. So I just wanted to read a few of them. Thomas Kennedy said, "Jimmy Needham, I need your music."
Oh, that's cool.
Because he made a joke that his last name is Needham, and he actually had T-shirts printed up that say "Needham" with a picture of a pig cut up. And he accidentally wore one of those to a bar mitzvah.
That's not good.
Without realizing it. You can get Jimmy Needham's music. Go on iTunes. Type Jimmy Needham. And I don't care. Jason Schiffo said, "Interesting listening to the program with Phil's brother on because it sounds like Phil, but with some really good medication to control his ADHD."
That's true.
Thanks, Jason.
Yeah, Rob is a little bit more
mellow
and how do I put it nicely?
Sentient,
restrained,
sentient, and he thinks clearly before he speaks.
Which is why he could not have a hit podcast like this one.
But it is why he could how he could be the dean of a law school.
And graduate from Harvard.
Right.
Yeah, there's that. Okay. John Fitch, "Jimmy was dynamite. It'll make your week." All right. Thanks, John. But then also said, "Still trying to figure out when Skye turned into liberal Archie Bunker."
What happened?
And then Jason said, "I agree. Skye Jethani has been making me nuts with all of his old man liberalisms."
I saw that comment.
And then I'm not done yet.
What did I miss?
And then John said, "Don't get me wrong. I love his insights. He just seemed a little cranky in Iowa. Personally, I think it'd be a fun bit for the show. Phil could take on the role of conservative Edith." Oh, Skye! You can't possibly mean that!
That's actually not bad.
That's pretty good.
And Janice said, "Skye writes a killer devotional, and his book With has really changed my outlook for the good on how I look at Christ, the church, and the world. I don't know why he goes on with his strong views on the South and conservatives."
Wow.
Skye,
okay,
what happened to you while I was away?
I actually listened to the podcast last week when we were driving home. It's a 9-hour drive, 8-hour drive.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just tone deaf, but I didn't pick up anything in last week's podcast that could be construed as anti-South or anti-conservative.
We talked about Deep South versus Yankeedom.
Right. And I said this isn't news because the Civil War was 150 years ago. We all know that there is a significant cultured gap between North and South.
True. I think we can say that's true.
That is true.
Not necessarily
I wasn't
which is right or wrong.
Or hyperbole.
Right.
So I was a little confused by that too because I didn't remember. Because usually usually I can predict when you say something that someone's not going to like.
And vice versa.
Yes.
And I certainly can do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my radar. I was going to say gaydar, but that doesn't really fit it at all.
Okay, Phil, that is something people are really going to be mad about, as am I.
That's a cultural term.
Terrible.
That's a cultural term. But it's not that.
Right.
It's what is it if it's liberal or socialist, a Marxdar?
A
Lenindar?
Here's this is what people react to. I don't think it's from last week's episode. I think in general, because we are all sort of inside the evangelical bubble, we tend to poke a little bit of fun at some of the blind spots within evangelicalism.
Yes, we do.
So it's sort of like interfamily humor. Humor, or just poking fun at some of our blind spots, like I said. And when it comes to politics, I've never talked totally openly about my politics on this podcast, but I can say quite definitively that I am nonpartisan. Like,
because you're a Marxist.
No, I am not a Marxist.
Okay.
Well, here's the
Wait a minute. Hold on a second. You're sitting there saying I'm nonpartisan.
Yeah.
So you're saying I'm not a liberal and I'm not a conservative. I believe a little bit of both.
Here's where I am. Two things. First of all, I don't believe either political party has a monopoly on biblical values.
Okay.
There are clearly some things I disagree with the Democratic Party about, and there are clearly, honestly, some things I disagree with the Republican Party about. I think what people are reacting to is I do frequently on this podcast speak to the economic underpinnings of a lot of cultural ideas. And I think people misconstrue that as anti-capitalist.
You're like the Ralph Nader of evangelicalism.
And I think it was Winston...
So it's my Nadar that you're picking up.
I think it was Winston Churchill who said that capitalism is the worst possible system except for all the others. So I am not anti-capitalist at all. In fact, you can show really clear studies that the decline in global poverty over the last half century is due more than anything else to the expansion of capitalism than it is charity or anything else. So I do not believe capitalism is inherently evil, but what I do think is that a lot of what goes on in our culture that people think are spiritually driven values are actually undergirded by economics. And that may make me sound like a Marxist, but I think it just makes me sound more holistic in the way I view cultural phenomena, that there are often economic factors.
People are having
not just
trouble
spiritual
with
ones.
Pope Francis for similar reasons, that he's sounding too non-capitalist, right? Because his approval ratings in North America are now dropping.
Right.
After being everyone's favorite pope ever.
And I think that's a really good example because clearly Pope Francis is traditionally conservative on areas like family values, divorce, abortion, that kind of stuff. But then on the environment, he has taken what people consider to be a progressive view.
Right.
And because he doesn't fit into the categories of Republican and Democratic politics, some people like him for different reasons and others dislike him for different reasons.
Right.
And I think that's probably going to be true of anybody who is putting their Christian values first and their political values second. You just can't fit neatly in one little category politically.
All right.
And I respect Christians on both sides for various reasons, and we have different priorities on what values should determine which way you pull the lever on election day, but it's complicated.
So we really want a pope that believes everything that we believe.
Right, and we want a president that believes everything
that we
and
believe.
On and on.
Yeah.
So, and we want a pastor that believes everything we believe.
Yeah. Thomas Dickinson said, all right, if Skye said something particularly offensive last week that we're just missing, send it to us, and we'll quote it next week.
Yeah.
The crazy offensive thing that Skye said last
Well,
week.
and can I say one thing about this issue, or do you want to move on?
No, you can say one thing. That's okay.
So, I mean...
You have 17 seconds.
Okay, I do think that we are human, and we do make mistakes.
Speak for yourself.
Well, just a few minutes ago, I said gaydar.
That's true, you
That
did.
was highly offensive.
And there are ways in which we can all grow, and I appreciate that, actually. I appreciate that our listeners kind of chime in and nudge us in places, because I feel like that's kind of what we do in general, which is, yes, we are Christians, and yes, we are in this evangelical world, but we are here to sort of challenge the narrowest view of that, I think, in hopes that we can grow.
Right.
So maybe that's uncomfortable sometimes.
Okay. Thomas Dickinson says, as a Red Sox fan, you had me at Yankee Dumb.
Who said that?
D-U-M-B. Yankee Dumb was one of the labels a sociologist made for the North. Yankee Dumb.
Right,
and he said Yankee
Dumb.
And gerrymander is named after a person. This I did not know.
What
Remember
is it?
we were speculating about the
Gerald Mander.
Massachusetts Governor Elbridge Gerry was accused of drawing state legislative districts to protect his party, so strangely shaped that they looked like an odd creature, the gerrymander.
Wow.
Really? So it's actually a fictitious creature to describe the weird shapes that Governor Gerry made out of the electorate
To protect his
base.
his base, yeah.
Which continues to this day by both parties, I might add.
Thank you, Thomas Dickinson. That was good to know. Solomon Parker says, get yourself a Patreon account so we can support this stuff. I'm not sending checks to your house. Oh, come on, send checks to my house.
Do not do it.
We should do that. But then we have to get organized, and the money has to go into a company, and then it needs an accountant, and it needs to exist somewhere, and then we have to have paperwork.
Well, I thought you guys were actually talking about something along those lines.
We were. And then,
He has to finish his space epic. I have things going on.
No, I mean, just so you know, Solomon, they are working on that. They're trying to figure out
Skye
what we
has
can
plenty
do.
of free time, but he's trying to make a living with it.
I don't know if this is the right time to make that announcement.
Skye has some free time, but he's...
What is that?
That's a big truck going right by the studio, probably going to crash through the wall. Probably driven by someone offended at Skye's rampant liberalism. Okay. Tony said, enjoyed the show. Laura Beth Kleinfelter. I wonder what the root of that name is. Was it an occupation where
You can
someone
really tell he's not prepared.
felted when someone felt it? Because if you made hats, you used felt, right?
You were a felter.
You were a felter.
What's a Klein?
I don't know. Is this German for
Farm?
feet? And if someone who wrapped felt around other people's feet?
This is really terrible.
That sounds perverse.
What are we talking about
Laura,
next?
what's the root of your last name? I want to know. Hysterical podcast. Jimmy Needham should come. Oh, Jimmy, need him to come back soon.
Ha, ha, ha.
Okay. Casey said, I love this podcast. I've known it existed from the very beginning, but never made time to listen until recently. I'm listening backwards now and have listened to about the last 14 months worth of podcasts in the last month or so.
Slow down.
That's insane.
Don't go crazy.
Yeah. Too deep. Pull up. Too deep. A couple I have listened to twice because I thought they were so good. Which ones? I'm curious. I've bought all of Skye's books, subscribed to his Devo, and ordered 2 of Dr. John Walton's books. Thank you so much for this podcast. It's awesome. Oh,
I love the fan love.
And Phil, I already own all of what's in the Bible, which my 4 kiddos and I love. Is there another way to support you? Send checks to Solomon, who will then forward them to me.
As soon as we get a Patreon account.
Yeah. In October, you can buy Galaxy Buck, Mission to Sector 9, on DVD, somehow.
Somewhere. Probably Walmart.
Somewhere. At Walmart. Buy all the copies at your local Walmart so they will send the report back to Bentonville, Arkansas. Hey, it sold out in one day.
Have you been to Bentonville?
I have been to Bentonville, but not to Walmart.
Okay.
No.
I was there not too long ago, but not Walmart.
Not Walmart.
But I was there shortly after the annual shareholders meeting.
Yeah.
There were signs all over the little airport.
Really?
Very nice airport.
Yeah, it is.
And a whole lot of
it
Asian
was
people.
In Bentonville? Mm-hmm. Why?
I think they were there for the shareholder meeting.
Oh,
And
really?
they were passing through the airport.
That's odd.
It was odd, because when you land in Arkansas, you just don't expect to see lots and lots of Asian people.
No, you don't.
But I did.
You really don't.
I was just in Chinatown in New York, and there were a lot of Asian people there.
Okay, this is less surprising to me.
Yeah.
Okay, big news. Big news from the world of football.
Oh.
Have you heard the big news from the world of football?
Well, it's a little early for the preseason to be starting. Is it started yet?
Big news. No, but it's close.
Close.
Big news.
Does it have to do with Arian Foster?
Big news of the world of football. National news. Headlines everywhere.
Wait,
There
Tom
is-
Brady.
No. There is a professional football player who doesn't believe in God.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Arian Foster.
Arian Foster.
Running back for the Texans.
Right. Always grew up
You
in
know
the
what?
South, lived in the South.
No,
lives still in
actually,
the South.
no. Actually, well, he went to high school in San Diego.
I think
He
this,
grew up in Albuquerque.
wasn't this predicted when Obama was running for president, that if he got elected, the next
have
thing you know, we'll have an atheist in the NFL?
playing football.
Is that too political?
Ironically, well, you got in trouble for putting a picture of Obama up on the screen during a sermon, didn't you?
Yeah, and I didn't even do it in an endorsement sort of way.
Yeah, it was just an
At
example.
church?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got in trouble for that?
Well, not from the church.
No.
It was just a,
No,
a
it was a
person who thought it was a political statement made on the wrong side.
We don't need to get into that.
No, we don't need to get into
really
that.
Okay.
don't, but-
We really don't. So Arian Foster, interestingly, grew up Muslim. His father, though, was what he describes as a free-thinking Muslim.
Meaning not religious.
I don't know what that means, but he says he takes his religion very seriously. But he didn't mind that his son rejected it, which is a little unusual.
Do you know where he grew up?
Albuquerque.
Okay.
Albuquerque, New Mexico, and then they moved to San Diego so he could play football at a better school for his last 2 years of high school.
Was his mother a Muslim also?
They divorced. She was raised Catholic and temporarily converted to Islam, and then they got divorced, and now she doesn't believe anything.
Okay.
Okay.
So he had a rather diverse religious upbringing.
Yes, it was not an upbringing that dug a rut in any particular direction.
Okay.
And so when he was still in high school, he decided, you know what, I don't think I buy this. His dad, he confessed that to his dad. He was a junior, senior high school. His dad said, okay. So clearly a pretty moderate Muslim.
Okay.
Then he went to the University of Tennessee. And at the University of Tennessee, on the football team, the coaches took the whole team to church for team building.
Sounds like a Southern football team.
Okay.
Now, that's a public university, right?
It happens.
The University of Tennessee.
I'm sure. I'm assuming the players had every right to say no thanks.
He said he didn't want to go, and he was told he had to.
Really?
Yeah, it's a team building exercise. You have to go.
That's kind of weird.
Just the way it is. You were ever on a football team?
Do I look like I was ever on a football team?
Definitely not.
Okay.
So he didn't really like that. And he says he became a very kind of antagonistic atheist.
Because he was being forced into religious stuff?
Yeah, and because he thought that he was smarter than, everyone else, which, on a typical football team, I can't imagine there's a very high bar.
Wow. I didn't go there.
I would not go there, Mr. Phil
That's
Vischer, who
strike
also
two.
has never played football.
They don't. I did too. I did for 2 weeks in junior high.
Remember they
Does
couldn't
not
find a
count.
helmet big enough for his
they
head?
did. Yeah,
That does not
football
surprise
helmets
me.
are small.
And your head is big.
They don't need to be big. No, but he's very intellectual. And football players are typically not chosen for intellect as much as physical size. Can I just say that? Is that okay to say?
You can.
Can I say that?
You can, because but I will say that too is a generalization, because the skill positions have to have a high IQ.
Right.
And a lot of times they're given lots of IQ tests.
Okay.
So actually, and you have to truly, honestly, for the most part, be really smart to play
It's
football.
usually after decades of playing and head injuries that they tend to lose.
That's true.
How do you feel if you're a football player and you're told that you are not in a skilled position?
Then you're in the brawn position, and
Oh, okay.
but still, you got to be smart to learn the plays.
I am going to disassociate myself from Phil's comments that playing football means you're probably not very bright.
Me
I
too.
didn't say that. That's not what I said.
Well.
I'm just saying
You're not chosen on your IQ for playing football.
Yes.
Okay, but that doesn't mean
most-
if you play football you don't have a high IQ.
That's true.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
If you're up to your eyeballs in football and football culture, you're probably not reading a lot of Stephen Hawking.
You're making
your
huge
spare
generalizations,
time?
Phil.
Okay. All right.
You are insulting God's sport.
Your point
You
is
realize that.
Arian Foster's a very smart man, and he
and-
did.
What about what's his name on the
Boy,
I have a head cold.
You're making a strong
Seattle
case here.
Seahawks with the dreadlocks, the
Yeah.
defensive.
Yeah, that guy.
That guy. He went to Stanford, did he?
Well, I don't know. All
I think he went to
Stanford
Stanford.
football players went
And
to Stanford.
a couple of years ago, I spoke to the to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and there was a guy there, a young guy who.
Now, you did chapel for the Tampa Bay
I did.
Buccaneers.
Actually, I'm doing it again this December.
Does everyone come?
Does everyone come?
The whole team? What percentage of the team?
They have two. I don't know, but when I was this was a couple years ago. The coach has now changed. Now it's Lovie Smith. When I
Yeah.
go this, but they did two things. I did because they don't have church on Sunday morning, obviously, because they are
Right.
getting ready for the game. They do a Saturday night chapel service, and it was well attended by the coaching staff and the players. And then later on in the evening, I did a Bible study, and that was totally voluntary, and it
Yeah.
was not as many guys, but they were well engaged.
Okay.
But I mean, some of these guys went to Stanford. I couldn't get into Stanford.
That's not true.
Oh, it's totally true. I got D's in gymnastics in high school. I could not have gotten in with that. Anyway.
Maybe not then.
D's in
But if
gymnastics.
you
Yeah,
wanted
like
to
my
go to
gym
Stanford.
scores were always super low.
Okay, can we get back on track here? The point that you're trying to make is that Arian Foster was a very smart man, and he didn't want to be forced to go to church or embrace religion.
Yeah, but I guess my point is this really a headline? Why is it a headline that someone in the NFL doesn't believe in God? Is football that Christian?
This was on ESPN, correct?
Yeah, ESPN wrote a big story about it, and it's been picked up in a lot of places.
Well, there is a lot of assumption that football players have that Christian bent. There's the Tim Tebow thing.
Okay, look, here it is. There are two things operating here. One, he is from Southern schools and from the South, and like the Tennessee story shows you, they are hand in glove. The South and America and football kind of all congeal.
So now you're denigrating the South.
I'm not going anywhere near either of you.
I'm not denigrating at all. I'm explaining because I'm from there.
Okay.
Okay. So it's kind of all important, a part of the culture. And so that's number one, that he is in that culture, was sort of groomed in that culture, but rejected the religious aspect of that culture.
Right.
That's number one. But the other reason that it's a big deal is that I believe that Fellowship of Christian Athletes has a huge impact in the football arena. And they spend a lot of time focusing on athletes from, peewee football all the way up, and especially at the professional levels. And I just think, that somebody breaking away from that whole thing and saying, I am an atheist in that football world is news, which is why they're covering it.
But it was big news last year or 2 years ago, whenever it was, with what's his name being the first openly gay player drafted.
Yeah,
that breaks the mold.
That
of
seems
what
different
think.
to me, though, because male professional sports are so masculine and macho that to say, "Hey, I'm gay," that really does stand apart. It seems like being a gay professional athlete would raise a lot more eyebrows in the locker room than being a non-Christian professional athlete, shouldn't it? And that did get more press, I guess.
Yeah,
so I guess it did.
Is he really the first openly atheist football
That's
player?
what they're saying.
I'm sure there's got to be
There
others.
have to be.
Well, I'm sure that nobody's bringing a reporter in to talk about his atheist beliefs.
Right.
I mean, that's the difference. Arian Foster has decided that I'm going to be public about my.
I don't know anything about him, but is he a good player?
Yeah,
Yes.
he's a good player. He's a running back.
He is.
So you have to be good to get it any time at all, because they don't last very long.
Don't you think there's, not just with football, but in sports in general, there tends to be this very juvenile view that if you follow God, he'll help you perform better as an athlete. And if you don't follow God, you're not going to do as well.
Right. And he's been questioning. One of the things he pokes on other players is, do you really think God cares that our team wins?
Right.
Which is very easy to poke on because it's very silly.
Right. So it'd be interesting if he does very well, it kind of blows that whole theory away.
I guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so. Okay. Article in the Religious News Service, why some conservative Christians like Donald Trump.
Uh-oh.
How is it possible for salt-of-the-earth, family-loving conservative Christians to be taken with a serial adulterer who won't take back misogynistic comments and who publicly trumpets the fact that he doesn't make mistakes that require God's forgiveness?
Good question.
The rise of the Donald as a presidential contender is a story in itself, but what most puzzles me about Trump's campaign is that I know some conservative family values voters who have taken to him. I'm not talking about evangelical pastors and the leaders of evangelical institutions. I can't find any support for Trump in those circles. I'm talking about some of the people in red states who go to church regularly, read Christian fiction, watch Veggie Tales with their kids, and are generally conservative in their political views.
Who are you quoting there?
A columnist on the Religion News Service.
Oh.
I don't have his name right in front of me. This, even though Trump recently wondered aloud to Anderson Cooper, why do I have to repent or ask forgiveness if I'm not making mistakes? And in a room full of faith and family values voters said, I think if I do something wrong, I just try to make it right. I don't bring God into the picture. I don't. He feels he's trying to figure out why some conservative family values Christian voters are getting excited about Trump. And he says, We shouldn't underestimate just how attractive his unguarded rhetoric is to conservatives who feel increasingly shut out of important conversations. Many voters feel like it's difficult to speak to contentious issues these days. Immigration, race relations, the nature of marriage. Trump's way of, quote, telling it like it is no matter the consequences comes as a breath of fresh air to conservatives who worry that political correctness is preventing us from having tough conversations. That's the theory.
Do you agree?
I don't know. I think that there is a current within conservative America that has become a very anti-federal government and anti anyone who's supposed to be an expert. Because it's the experts that are telling you that global warming is happening, that evolution is true, that you shouldn't spank your kids, that you shouldn't pray in schools. So there are all these things that are being, pulled from their hands by quote unquote experts. So anyone who can stand up to the experts and say you're full of it, there's a populist rallying behind. Someone who can be a bully to the bullies, I think is how they would view it. And Trump just doesn't seem to care about the consequences of anything that he says or does. And I think some people find that inspiring.
You have a funny look on your face, for those who can't see it.
I wonder, does it really matter what a politician's faith is to begin with? And should it? Or should it matter if they can govern well and run a business well?
Well,
and
does it matter what their character is?
Character is different.
Okay.
So I'm asking about their religious beliefs and their faith.
I think what voters are often looking for is as much of an alignment on beliefs and values with their leaders as possible. So if someone says, hey, I'm an evangelical Christian just like you, there's the assumption of 100%.
You don't have to question a lot.
You don't have to look into it a whole lot more. You've got alignment.
Which is a dangerous assumption to make.
It is dangerous. Because it inspires politicians to just say, hey, I'm like you. Right. Don't ask me any more questions.
I think with Trump, there's a couple of different things going on. The article touches on these. One is there is this fatigue over the political correct policing that's going on in the culture. I just heard today, I think, that Target stores are removing all gender-based signage from their stores. So
restrooms?
No, but they have a boys' toy section and a girls' toy section and a boys' bedding and a girls' bedding and all that, and they're removing all of that because they've gotten a lot of feedback.
So now you just have to figure it out by color code.
They're getting rid of the colors too.
No, they can't get rid of.
They are getting rid of the colors.
But the girls' toys are all pink.
Well, but they have apparently the shelving.
Girls' bedding is all pink.
The shelving background colors are pink and blue and all. They're getting rid of that. The products themselves, Target can't control.
Right.
But there's sort of a minority of people speak out saying, Target, you need to stop this, and everyone else kind of goes, really? Right. Now we can't have boy and girl toy section. So I think there's a fatigue in the population over that kind, and Trump represents the complete opposite of that, where he's misogynistic and bombastic and totally non-PC, and I think some people find that refreshing. The other one, which the article does tap into, which I think is accurate, is there is a very wide gulf in the polling anyway between evangelical leaders and evangelical kind of rank and file on the issue of immigration. Almost every evangelical denomination, religious leader, political leader supports comprehensive immigration reform. Because most of these denominations look at the stats and realize their only growth is happening among Latinos. So I've seen this for years. I did some reporting on it for CT.
What you just said sounded like you're saying their interest in immigration reform is only self-serving and not based in love for their neighbors at all.
No, it is based in love for their neighbors, but it's also based in the fact that...
This is where you get yourself in trouble, Mr.
It's also based on the fact that...
Are you happy that he's in trouble?
No, I'm helping him. I'm pointing out.
I think one of the primary...
Thank you, America. I'm providing a service to deliberalize Archie Bunker Skye.
One of the primary values that a lot of evangelicals hold is the advancement of the gospel in the world and in their culture. And looking at the statistics, the gospel is advancing most quickly in the United States among Latinos.
Okay.
They're the ones planting the most churches. They're the ones growing most, for example, in the Southern Baptist Convention. And so a lot of the leaders are looking at this and going, we need comprehensive immigration reform. But when you poll the people in the pew, the majority of evangelicals there are completely against immigration reform. And I think they find Trump's posture on immigration very appealing. So those two issues, the tired fatigue over political correctness and his immigration views, I think, are finding an audience.
This piece was written by Trevor Wax, who is managing editor of The Gospel Project. He closes by saying, it's a strange moment in American politics when a man who fails to embody even a few of the virtues lauded by church-going folks across the nation captures even a sliver of their heart's affections. It will be a long time before Trump sees any of his own mistakes and begins to regret them. Hopefully, it won't take as long for his religious followers to see his campaign for what it is and regret their big mistake.
Alrighty then.
Dump, dump, dump. So can we say we're officially, as a podcast, not endorsing Donald Trump?
I don't think we're endorsing anybody.
I feel comfortable saying that.
You do?
But we're negative endorsing. We're de-endorsing. Disendorsing?
Don't you think if Donald Trump was actually an evangelical, he would clearly fall in the category of crazy uncle?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
I think he's
no question.
He's the crazy uncle in whatever demographic pot you put him in.
Right.
For sure. But here's the thing. The man can run a business. Like, there's no question about that. The man can run a business and be successful.
But running a business is
in
very
business.
different than running a government.
There are hundreds
It
of
is.
thousands of people who can do that.
It is. That's very true.
He's not even in the 300 wealthiest people in America. I mean, there's hundreds of people wealthier than.
Remember Ross Perot's campaign back in '92?
Yeah, very well.
He was richer than Trump.
He had the same credentials, though, as that I
wish
know
Warren
how to
Buffett would run
a good business. But I mean, the problem is running a government is so different because if you're running a business, you have executive authority that, frankly, a president doesn't really have because the president can't unilaterally pass laws. He or she has to.
Running a business is like being king.
Right. And trying
Not
to,
like being
having a king who has been running his own business try to run the country, that would not
Watch
go well.
the sparks fly.
I know, that would not go well.
That would be a great reality show.
I mean, and that is a big problem. Yes, he is not politically correct. And yes, he says whatever he wants. And yes, it is always his way. But after the election is over, who does he have to work with? He has to work with everybody to get anything done. And he does not have that.
If people want any insights into my politics, one of my criteria when I think about voting for a candidate is it's really actually very simple.
Would you
and
let
it's not
them
the only
babysit
candidate.
your kids?
Not exactly.
No?
But it's not the only criteria, obviously. But here's the base one is, do I believe this individual actually cares more about the welfare of this country than they do about their own well-being? And that's
We'd never elect anyone, Skye.
Well, no, I think I've met some very good people in Washington, D.C. that I think genuinely care.
Wait a minute. Christian was just more cynical than Skye.
Yeah, that was sad.
Sorry.
I don't
We
think
expect
I
you
can
to be
wake
the
up
one that
tomorrow.
holds us up with optimism.
I am the red, white, and blue of the podcast. That's true.
So yeah, I think, and it's a character issue. Do they genuinely care more about the well-being of the country they are apparently called to lead, or are they out for themselves? And we unfortunately do have an epidemic of people in politics who are thinking ultimately about their careers and their pockets and their whatever. But there are good people, and we need more good people in politics. And that, I don't care if a Democrat or Republican, if ultimately it's a self-serving, if they're seeking that position in order to aggrandize themselves, that's a big red flag for me. And it's hard to
How
believe
can you
that.
tell?
I mean, if Trump were
You can
elected,
tell.
With
there
Donald
would be
Trump, you can
big
definitely
Trump
tell.
red letters on the top of the White House.
Right.
And he'd probably turn the East Wing into a casino.
Right. What? He'd repaint Air Force One.
He
Right.
would.
Black with red Trump letters.
Gold. I think it's gold Trump letters on his plane. Okay. Rob Bell's on the road again. Remember Rob Bell?
On the road
I
again.
do.
On the road again with Rob Bell. Coming to a town near you. Rob Bell, popular pastor, hipster preacher Rob Bell is mashing up quantum physics, Jewish Kabbalah, and Catholic mysticism to explain humanity's future evolution.
That sounds dangerous.
In his 30-city Everything is Spiritual tour, the former megachurch pastor and short-lived Oprah Winfrey Network talk show host delivers a 2-hour monologue aimed to a millennial generation less interested in sin and judgment and more attuned to science and cosmic connections. He has only one visual aid on stage, a large dry erase board in the shape of a long, skinny triangle. In the far left corner, he draws a small black dot representing the Big Bang. Moving to the right, as the universe expands over the course of his talk, he sketches milestones of evolution over 13.8 billion years. So he's clearly lost the Ken Ham crowd already.
He has.
Christian faith onto modern evolutionary science, quoting New Age healing champion Deepak Chopra, Sufi mystic Rumi, and Catholic theologian Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. An amalgamation sure to rile some of the evangelical crowd that made him famous. Now, if you don't know who Rob Bell is, he was a Wheaton College graduate, Fuller Theological Seminary, became an evangelical luminary with the successive Mars Hill Bible Church in Michigan, which he founded at age 28, which grew to more than 10,000 people. Then he published Love Wins, in which he questioned the existence of hell. Evangelicals were swift to part company, describing Bell as a modern-day heretic. Farewell, Rob Bell. John Piper famously tweeted. A year later, Bell left Mars Hill, moved to Los Angeles in search of a broadcast audience and, quote, a more forgiving faith. Earlier this year, the partnership with Oprah Winfrey fizzled, but Bell says he's working on another TV program. He did this before, right? He did a tour while he was still at Mars Hill.
Yeah, he did. I remember when he passed through Chicago because I interviewed him for Leadership Journal.
Right.
On that tour. I forget what that was
Right.
called. Drops Like Stars.
Drops like stars?
Yeah.
Is drops a noun or a verb?
I think it's a noun, if I recall how he used it.
Okay.
So let me just ask you this. Is he one of us? Or has he left the farm?
Well, he's white. So in that
one of
sense,
you.
it depends on how he's an English speaker. Is that...
He's human. I mean, what are you asking? Is he an evangelical?
I mean, it sounds like he's taken his evangelical faith and mixed in a bunch of other things in there, possibly. So now he's becoming not what he was.
Well, I think that's fair. The journey he's been on is one that we've seen before, which is somebody who grew up in a squarely evangelical community, educated in evangelical schools, pastors in evangelical church, but over time his own theology starts to move into what is typically considered mainline liberalism. And he slowly brought some of those progressive ideas into his evangelical audience, and people started going, ooh, that's interesting, or ooh, I'd not heard that before, or isn't that different? And because you're bringing that tension in, you build an audience. And like many others before him and still some after him, he eventually went so far to basically fully embrace mainline liberal theology. So he's pro-gay marriage. I don't know if he's a universalist or not, depends how you define that term, but a lot of what he's articulating now sounds a lot more like mainline liberal Christianity than it does evangelicalism.
Right. So when John Piper said, farewell, Rob Bell, some people have said that he was saying he lost his salvation, and what he was really saying is you've officially jumped the fence from evangelical theology to more mainline liberal theology.
Yeah, and I can't speak for John Piper, but he may have meant both of those things.
I can speak for John Piper.
Yeah.
No, you think he may have meant both
I don't
of those
know,
things?
because it depends if Piper thinks that you need to hold to an evangelical theology in order to
retain your salvation.
Which
I
does
don't
sort
know.
of sound like John Piper.
I don't know. I can't speak for him.
If I
but,
want to guess.
like I said, Rob Bell's not the only one who's done this. And what's interesting is it seems to happen over and over again where somebody pushes the envelope a little bit with their theology within evangelicalism, and it attracts a lot of, especially younger people who are somewhat dissatisfied with evangelicalism, but given enough time, they eventually break the envelope and end up as a progressive mainline liberal Christian.
And there are already a gazillion of those.
And once you're in that
they
camp,
lose their audience.
yeah, if you're an Episcopal priest in the United States anyway, and you write a book about the non-existence of hell, no one buys that book,
Right.
Because that's not a big deal. Or if you're a mainline liberal Methodist and you write a book about gay marriage, no one buys it because who cares? It's kind of
We expect you to say
right,
it.
it's ho-hum. But
Right.
if you are a Bible church pastor from Wheaton College and Fuller Seminary and an evangelical, and you write a book questioning hell or gay marriage, well, then you've got tension. Then you have an audience.
Right.
So it's happened over and over where people push the envelope and they get that audience, but then when they finally, I'm using air quotes, come out of the closet as a mainline more liberal, progressive Christian, well, the tension's gone. And
Do you think
so's the
they
audience.
have realized that they're really a mainline progressive Christian?
think so.
Or did people have to tell them, you're really... Because I'm wondering if they think they're expanding the tent of evangelical thought and don't really realize that they've left the tent, that they can't expand it that far.
Well, I think it happens with every generation. There are some that just grow up in evangelicalism and it doesn't work for them anymore, and they
Right.
find themselves in the more liberal camp. And there's always going to be leaders who emerge that take them over there. So it'll happen again and again. It's just the nature
What
of...
is he saying in this new...
In Everything is Spiritual, Bell explores the religious mystery within science, drawing on the evolutionary theology of the early 20th century Jesuit paleontologist Teilhard. Did you know there was an early 20th century Jesuit paleontologist? Bell argues that ever since the Big Bang, matter has been developing more complexity, depth, and unity. Particles bonded to form atoms. Atoms bonded to form molecules. You got to read this like Captain Kirk. Molecules bonded to form cells. Cells bonded to form organisms. Humans developed language to form social bonds. You say, I just want to be part of something bigger than myself. Congratulations. Everything in the freaking universe has been saying the same thing for 13.8 billion years.
Is that a quote?
Yes.
From Rob Bell?
Yes.
He said freaking?
He said freaking.
Now he's outside the camp.
The universe moves forward when people of similar essence and substance bond together. Loneliness is going the wrong direction. Racism is the failure to bond with another of similar essence and substance. Progress, he said, in a nod to Teilhard, the Jesuit, is the soul of the universe.
See,
At what point do you realize you're not really saying anything anymore?
yeah.
Well, certainly there's
I think he is
more.
saying something,
Sure.
but the problem is, I wrote a chapter about this in Futureville.
Yeah.
I called it Evolution, that chapter, and it's this view that, the universe is progressing more and more and more. The problem is, what one group says is progress, another group says is regression,
regress.
is
Yeah.
regress. So this is modernity. It goes back a couple hundred years post-Enlightenment that said the world's getting better and better and better, more and more complicated, more and more advanced. But that also gave us World War I and World War II, the two most bloody conflicts in world history. It's also created the Cold War. It's done a lot of... So... Yeah, on one level, I agree with Rob, but on another level, it's like, well, progress in and of itself is in the eye of the beholder. And you can't just point to everything as progressing in a positive way. Mm-hmm. So,
Right.
and this is the fallacy, and I think an equally terrible fallacy is what I call escape, or, did I call escape? Is that the one? Evolution escape, yeah.
Right. Well, and some people said we had a story a while back that people were saying Islam needed a reformation, needed
Right.
to reform itself, and that's exactly what ISIS believes they are doing.
Exactly.
They are reforming Islam to make it pure again. So progress, and we look at that as you're going backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And they look at it as we're recapturing what was true
Yeah.
and what's been distorted. So just the notion of we worship progress and that progress is the evolution of the universe is so subjective.
It is.
It's
And
not meaningful.
I can't critique because I haven't seen his event, but I'd love to know what he does with the second law of thermodynamics.
It's sin. The second law of thermodynamics.
Things going from order to disorder?
Yeah, that's what sin does.
Oh.
Although he doesn't. I don't know if he has sin in his universe. Well, I gotta wrap it up.
Depends on what universe he's in now.
I guess so. Maybe he's in the multiverse in a little Rob Bell bubble. Well, Arian Foster doesn't believe in God. Rob Bell's saying things that sound kind of odd. And Donald Trump, you might think he's a chump, but some of us are voting for him, giving him a bump. I think that Western civilization is falling apart like our nation, and we better get down to the gas station before there's a run on commodities like toilet paper and water and diapers and bananas.
And gas. And gas.
This is my favorite part of the song so far.
And
of all
gas.
the parts, this is the best one. And gas before Donald Trump can buy it all for himself. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.